So welcome everybody to mid-March. This month, Brian Cosby, who I'll introduce here in a little bit, we're talking about a disorganized mishmash of tips to make you write more gooder. Intentional on the play there. So welcome. Thank you for joining. I am your host, Angie Wolf, for those that are new. I am the owner, founder, master trainer for Ideas at Dawn. We help large civil engineering and construction firms bring them a competitive advantage with their proposals to win more work without adding on more payroll. Services we offer include proposal management, writing, editing, graphic design support, 3D graphics, and then also training. And then this month, for March, I have Brian Cosby joining me. He's been writing and managing proposals since '02. He currently is at Bohannon in Houston. He loves helping people write more effectively, which is both a hobby and now his career that he started in college. And he believes that good writing truly is a difference maker when it comes to proposals. So what he'll talk about this next hour or so, you'll learn tips on how to improve the impressions your proposals make, the value of pathetic arguments, mechanisms for proposal cohesion, and then the importance of opposing voices. So that's what you'll learn about those four things. Other housekeeping items, if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. If it's something that's relevant to what Brian is talking about, I will interrupt him and ask him that question. Otherwise, we'll save questions for the end if it doesn't work out. I'm asking him at that time. And then if you stay till the end, there's a little something special at the end that I will be sharing as well. Anything else, Brian, before I hand the screen over to you?
Nope.
Okay, so thank you all. I'll stop sharing my screen and Brian will take over.
Hit the share button. All right. Everyone see?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Angie, for the intro.
Of course.
Yeah. Like you said, I like helping people with their writing. It's been something I've done since college, and it's a lot better to do it for money than for beer. So I really had a struggle trying to figure out what to talk about at this webinar. I probably had about 37 hours worth of content to start, and it's changed rapidly over the days to prep. So at this point, though, I think it's an organized mishmash of tips to make you write more gooder. So with that, we'll go. So kind of specific big buckets I'm going to talk about that tied to the points that Angie lined out were modes of persuasion. There's a bit of rhetoric 101, some methods of content cohesion, some stylistic devices and choices, and then some mindset shifts. Before we totally dive in, I did want to state a few things that I feel are really important when it comes to proposal writing and proposal management. And these are things that really inform how I look at our role in proposals. So I want to put them out here as an initial frame of reference for the presentation. So first, proposals are all hands on deck efforts. This is not the product of a sole writer. This shouldn't be the realm of the tortured soul, like my college plan of moving to a hamlet with France, scrawling immortal odes to darkness in smoky cafes. You know, the best written proposals are produced by a team of writers, technical experts, reviewers, and us failed poets in the marketing department. Next, the primary task of a proposal writer is often being a rewriter. I shocked my technical writing students in college who were engineering majors when I broke the news to them that they would actually be charged with writing far more in their careers than I ever would as an English major. We do a fair bit of writing, to be sure, but helping our technical experts with crafting their content is really where we can often establish our greatest value in our firms. There is no done, only deadline. We aren't 16th century writers. We don't get to pull a Milton and take 40 years to draft a literary masterpiece. We do the best that we can in the time that we have. 40 days would be an eternity when it comes to proposals. And as you know, writing is just one piece of the job of the proposal manager. And a lot of my success in proposals has come from, frankly speaking, what I call knowing when to punt. If you take too much time off the clock with tinkering, you're not giving your counterparts enough time to get in the game. And then you're at a time when you finally get that ball back. So when drafting content, do keep in mind what Voltaire wrote. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Final frame of reference is thick skin and a sense of humor are really essential. Writing good proposals is facilitated by receiving criticism and critique. Being able to take this feedback without getting your feelings hurt is perhaps really one of the most undervalued and untrainable skills in your toolbox. And let's face it, this is an inherently stressful job. It just is. And if anybody tells you otherwise, they're selling something, which is kind of our job. But when we take ourselves too seriously, it's going to be burnout city. So you kind of got to just take it with a grain. All right. Just checking. Saw chat messages pop up. Just Angie obviously introduced me if somebody says, I can't hear you.
Nope, you're all good, Brian.
Okay. The last thing I'll add that I don't have a slide for is I got my degrees in English to be a writer, not a talker. So I apologize if I stumble a bit, and sometimes I forget to breathe, and it really makes my dad mad when we talk on the phone because I yawn. So just if I yawn, it's not because I'm bored, it's because I'm incompetent at breathing. So
good at humor though, Brian.
Try to be. Gotta have that sense of humor. So this first thing that I want to hit on is a bit of rhetoric 101. Rhetoric is not a bad word. It's really, this is the center of what we do in proposal writing. It is the art of persuasion. In the study of rhetoric, you learn about the three modes of persuasion: logos, ethos, and pathos. Logos is all about logic and rationality. It's where you're leveraging data and facts and proof to convince your audience of your argument. Ethos is the character of the writer or of your firm as the proposer. It's built on your experience, your reputation, and your qualifications. Pathos is about getting an emotional reaction. This is pulling at the heartstrings or poking at the anger badger. So logos is strong in our proposals, especially in the technical sections. You know, you're writing a specific approach, it's there in spades. And so if we go with a food analogy, and it's lunchtime, so it seems apt, especially in the E part of the AE world, you can consider logos to be your entree, okay? Ethos is also strong, sometimes frankly too strong in our proposals. And this is telling the story about why our firm's the best. And now I know that all of you on this call would be liars in that, because my firm is actually the best. Hate to break it to you, but you heard it here first. But you can think about ethos as your side dish, your accompaniments. It just helps you get a well-rounded meal. Pathos, though, can be a bit more contentious. You need to think of it as an appetizer or a dessert. If you have too much of your appetizer before you eat, you're all full up. You don't want your dinner. If you have too much dessert, you're sick to your stomach after your meal. But a just right-sized portion can really whet the appetite or be the perfect cap to include your evening dining experience or lunchtime. So I don't think anybody here probably struggles with the ethos or the logos, but I want to take a minute or so to really talk about pathos a bit. Pathos can get a bad rap, even in rhetoric, the field. When using it, the writer or speaker is said to be making pathetic arguments and pathetic appeals, which just cracks me up because I'm a nerd. But emotion is where we really identify with our audience. It's where we connect. It's the place that we say, I get you. And you don't want to be overwrought, but some degree of emotion, without some degree of emotion, you're going to come across sterile. I really like cover letters and introductory paragraphs as the great spots to put that little touch of pathos. And I've got a couple examples to take a peek at. So this first one is from a proposal for a risk and resiliency assessment. This was a newer requirement for municipal entities, and a lot of the communities that we talked to were not happy that they had to do it. They saw it as this bureaucratic hurdle, and they weren't into it. And also, this was coming up about 6 months into the pandemic, so life was a little bit weird. Excuse me. So, the old adage that implores us to expect the unexpected has started to feel a bit trite in 2020. Even the unexpected has seemed far-fetched. Murphy's Law is perhaps a more apt motto. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. But cynicism is the easy and lazy path. By identifying the reasonable risks, communities like the city are proactively taking steps to be as prepared as possible should such risks become reality. Bohannon Houston is here to help. Though we cannot foresee every possible threat that may come, BHI brings a strong understanding of the city's drinking water system that will help you quickly identify the reasonable risks to prepare for, as well as the strategies needed to help protect system integrity. So the opening paragraphs here are very pathos-driven, followed by an ethos-driven third paragraph. In that first paragraph, we're trying to play to the frustration and exasperation everyone was feeling. But this was also intended to give the reader a sense of how the unexpected has really become reality, and laying the foundation for why this type of project, even if they're doing it begrudgingly, is relevant and important for their community. The second paragraph is designed to then shift their thinking into making them acknowledge, yes, there is a valid need for this project, and that by diving into it, they're doing the right thing. It's a slight ego stroke, but people like to get the sense that what they're doing is important and is good. And then in the third paragraph comes the ethos, explaining why BHI is the amazing firm that can help them do this right. Next example, pardon me, is about a drainage management plan. And I try not to have many slides that are pure text. Apologies, I know what it's like and what we tell people not to do in PowerPoint presentations. So good drainage infrastructure is like a well-maintained IT network. Operating without flaw goes unacknowledged by the people who rely on it every day. And without fail, there happens to be a problem. The fact that everything has worked unnoticeably for years without a problem will be forgotten in an instant. Such infrastructure, whether physical or digital, is not built on luck. It takes careful analysis and understanding of existing conditions and an eye for envisioning how to accommodate future changes to avoid potential issues. With this RFP for your drainage management plan, the county will be able to select a planning partner who brings the impeccable technical expertise and an inquisitive vision for ensuring that your drainage infrastructure within the watershed continues to go unnoticed for years to come. So here we open with a simile and develops into an analogy, which, by the way, keeping score at home, that's a rhetorical device that people can relate to. It's that pang of when all your hard work that's gone into making sure things work well is just completely forgotten the second there's a minor issue. The next paragraph acknowledges that it takes skill to build good drainage infrastructure. And this comes with the pathos-driven, but not quite directly stated appeal that the client should consider themselves among those who maintain and create this good infrastructure. And I'm sure that you can all envision that the third paragraph identifies precisely who that planning partner should be. It was us. So overall, you need to provide a balanced reading experience. A purely logos-driven proposal might be too technical and dry, alienating some of your readers. Only ethos, you're just a braggart full of hot air. All pathos, it's gonna feel like the worst of what people think of marketing. It's just a schlocky sales pitch they don't even want to be involved with. So if we look at our argument types tied to the food pyramid, we can remember that all three have a place and a use. Kind of the first take-home type tip from this is we have to keep in mind that we, generally speaking, are not the people whose names are going on the proposal. We don't sign that letter. So it's really important that we write considering that it's someone else whose name is behind it. So when you're leveraging your pathos, you kind of need to bear that in mind, because not everybody might be quite your personality type. So you think about things on what I lovingly refer to as the scale of schmaltz. When you're pondering what to write, the thing you need to do is start just a bit further than where your author or that person who's really signing the proposal is comfortable. This is looking at this, if we've got this range as our scale of schmaltziness. If your author generally sits over here, and you'd like them to come across about this point, aim your level of schmaltziness and your pathetic appeals kind of over here in your first draft. They're gonna pull back for the most part. Sometimes they have it, and that scares me. But I always let them pull back more than halfway. So I stretch a little bit further, probably toward the right, than perhaps I would even be comfortable with. But it's where I go to kind of get it to end up where I want it. Never start here. They won't take you seriously, and they'll just toss the letter and rewrite it saying, VHI is pleased to submit this. Okay, another tip, write to the sentiment. Write sentences and paragraphs how you want them to sound, and then get with your technical folks to truth it up. I like to do this with what I call fill in the blank or Mad Lib style write text. So here's just an example. And if you did Mad Libs as a kid, perhaps you can replace the red text with what those fields looked like. But this person was responsible for designing length and size of water line that will provide effluent reused water to what users, reducing groundwater withdrawals by how much. Then I get with my technical folks, and they help me fill in the blanks with accurate information, and they're good at the accurate information, and that helps get me to get the sentence I want, and them to get not have to write it, frankly speaking. And I know that example is not the best in terms of writing to pathos, but again, 37 hours of content. I was doing some scrambling. I'll admit it. We don't do that in proposals.
Never.
All right.
Hey, Brian, real quick, a question that Abe asked. Does the pathos focused style of writing resonate with clients like USACE, whether it's USACE in the US or overseas in Afghanistan was his question.
So I cannot speak to the global market. I've only worked stateside and had all the proposals on the state side. And generally speaking, I would say I probably have a lot more thumbs up on on my proposals where I've kind of laid it on, again, most often in the cover letters, than people who've told me, oh man, they read that letter and they do not like us. So I remember having some feedback on proposals like, we read your cover letter and we knew that we were going to pick you. So I can say that it is effective if it's not overdone. And that's why, like I said at the start, it's on all hands on deck type of work that we do. So you always want somebody else to read what you've written to give you a bit of that reality check. For the risk and resiliency plan, I actually ended talking about murder hornets that had popped up during the pandemic, and I was sure somebody was going to strike that when they read it, but they didn't.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was fun. So.
But Abe, I would say, to me, it doesn't matter the client, that they're all reviewing a document, and however you can appeal to their evaluation criteria, and especially with USACE and risk and what you can do to minimize that and maximize resiliency. And so using that pathos and helping them envision what they are going to get, I think is, plus I think it's also maybe a breath of fresh air and a little bit different and unique, which is why you'll probably even stand out more.
Yeah. Never let them start with please to submit. That's my number one rule. So
more people need to preach that.
I know. More people need to drink the Kool-Aid too. All right. So the next big topic is about content cohesion. And I start this off with a question. To be a good technical writer, do you have to be a master of the content? As I was getting my my English degree and getting ready to graduate, I obviously was starting to look for a job as a technical writer. My friend's father asked me this very question, and I felt I had to justify my degree and my worthiness to be hired as a writer. So I, of course, said, no, sentences are sentences. They're composed of nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs. And as long as you understand how to use those basic building blocks, whatevs. Then I actually got a job, and I encountered a paragraph of text like this. And you don't need to read it, and I'm not going to read it, but I immediately wanted to call my friend's dad and change my answer. As I got further into my new career, feeling like I was completely over my head with the technical content, though, things started to show up in how I read this heavy text that I was handed. And with time and remembering that there was some value to all those years of college, I could start seeing how the text was held together to make an understandable, cohesive paragraph. So there are threads that connect the sentences of good paragraphs, and identifying and understanding what those threads are and how they work, I find helps me write and rewrite strong paragraphs. So some of the threads to talk about today are here. And again, I get to get a little return on investment for my college degree and actually use the vocabulary. So thank you, Angie. I appreciate that. The first one is called theme read, basically topic comment. The sentences pivot around the verb phrase, and the same theme is in that topic position in each of the sentences. These are paragraphs where obviously there's a singular focus for the reader. This can be a description of deliverables, your people, your firm capabilities, anything that you got to kind of dive deep in. And honing in on that one topic and having it in the initial position of your sentence helps your reader maintain that focus and follow your flow. Here's a sample paragraph. Once the preferred alternative is selected, BHI's in-depth drainage analysis of proposed conditions will be completed in accordance with the drainage design manual. The analysis will be documented in the preliminary drainage report for the full extent of the project components. This analysis and report will help formulate the preferred roadway design for the interchange, etc. Here you see those theme phrases lit up, and the verb phrases are identified with the italicized text. And so you see it's not always that exact same word or phrase that's repeated, but there are clear and distinct connections as you move through the paragraph at the word and phrase level that keep keep your reader and your content focused on the theme. Next one is similar to theme ream, and we call it old new, and it also pivots around that verb phrase. This is a style that I often keep in mind when explaining how a technical process reaches its endpoint, and it's also used well in shifting the reader's thinking or making a new point. This is one that I consciously try to bring into cover letters or, again, intro text, where I do most of my writing from scratch, at least. But with this setup, again, so the old information starts the sentence and then introduces the new information. That new information then becomes the old information of the next sentence, which goes to the new information, and that proceeds through the paragraph. You have to be a little careful, though. If you have too many sentences like this, your reader's going to feel like they're reading one of those "if you give a mouse a cookie" books. If you parents have ever read one of those, you know where it goes. And if you haven't read one, you have my jealousy. So here's an example, again, just with a paragraph. Got a lot of drainage paragraphs, I realize now in this presentation. But another major drainage problem on this creek is the bank erosion and scour occurring at the I-25 bridges. The root cause of the erosion at the I-25 crossing is the short span configuration of the twin bridges that has caused narrowing of the channel. The design of the original bridges was flawed in that the length was selected to minimize costs without consideration of the hydraulic effects of contraction scour due to increased velocities. Focusing on the costs and ignoring the hydraulics has resulted in more than 7 feet of channel degradation and the erosion of the abutment slopes. So again, just kind of color coding from sentence to sentence, the old information to the new information, and then how that new information, again, tied with words and phrases, is connected to the sentence that precedes it. Sequential is one that I didn't provide an example for because it is fairly obvious, but it is worth mentioning. And it uses a logical flow to describe something. And this could be a task, so a process you describe from task to task. Could be the history of a project area that you talk through chronologically from the initial infrastructure design to where it stands now. It could be the overview of location. The key is just making sure that you have a logical progression from point A to point B or time A to time B. So if you're, describing a river, you might start at the headwaters and then flow down the waterway until its termination, describing it as you go. And that way you're taking your reader on that journey and they're not surprised by what comes next. Final one is telegraphed, and it's similar obviously to sequential, but generally when it's not perhaps the same logical progression from one point to the next. Basically, what this does is provide your reader an advanced organizer that lines out what is going to come in the following sentences. A real basic example is perhaps talking about an org chart, saying our team structure is highlighted in the org chart, includes the leadership of Miss Scarlett as PIC and Mr. Green as PM. And then those two following sentences talk in turn about Miss Scarlett as PIC and Mr. Green at PM. When you set that advanced organizer up for your reader, you got to follow it. And I'm sure you've all read that paragraph that says our PIC is Miss Scarlett, our PM is Mr. Green, and our lead engineer is Miss White. And then they only talk about Mr. Green and Miss Scarlett. And it's like, wait, you forgot somebody. So it violates their expectations. And part of good writing is not violating that reader's expectations of what's to come. So the takeaway tip here is that we use intentionally multiple methods to craft strong paragraphs. It's not like my whole document has to be theme ream or old new or whatever, but it's understanding how they affect your reader and how they work together to, combine into a good, easy to follow paragraph. What you see here is kind of my my formula for my cover letters. It's talking about the client and their specific concern, why that problem is meaningful for them and their community. Try to give it a bit of a hook that makes them see that my firm is the one that's going to provide the relief, and then project several reasons why their problem is in good hands with our team. So, and granted, my cover letters are usually more than 9 sentences, but I didn't want to create that much stuff on the page for y'all. So these are some methods of cohesion to think about as you write. They're not the be all end all, but a few, again, just to get you thinking when you're looking through your text, how it does hold together. The material that we write about in the AE world, generally, I feel provides us with fairly savvy readers who can follow along, even if we make what I'd call reasonable jumps within a paragraph, where it's not quite as obvious that there's that word level connection. But if you're, as a writer or a rewriter, having a hard time following along with the text, look at how you can put some of these methods into play in terms of getting yourself to understand and getting your reader to understand how it's all coming together. All right. Sorry. Like I said, talker, I gotta drink a lot. Stylistic devices and choices. First one I want to talk about is using parallel structure. That's using the same order or pattern of your words and phrases to help your readers absorb and understand the content. One of the nice things about parallel structure is it gives your text balance and rhythm and emphasis. That enhances the readability and really deepens the impact. So we consider the famous Julius Caesar line, Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. This is a succinct example of parallel structure, both the original Latin and the translation. So I came, I saw, I conquered is pronoun, past tense verb, repeated, that's it. The quote would not have the same effect, however, if, and would never have been remembered if it said, after arriving, I assessed the situation before the battle began. We had a snack, troops took a nap, and then my army delivered the victory. Still as informative, but not quite as memorable. In the teaser text for the webinar, you read that, we included these bullet points, and you can see the same pattern and cadence as we go through. Article, noun, preposition, noun phrase. Article, noun, preposition, noun phrase. Article, noun, preposition, noun phrase. No. So this was obviously an intentional violation, and I could do it for this audience to prove a point, but I would never put this in a proposal. So parallel structure is really important when you're composing any type of list. Duties on the resume are an obvious example. Having each item follow that same repeating pattern emphasizes the cohesion of the listing. It's the same thing when it comes to accomplishments on a project. It really helps your reader follow the flow and feel like they're reading a smooth bit of narrative. When things are written out of parallel structure, especially when it's obvious they should have been written in parallel, it makes me hyperventilate a little bit. Never let them see you hyperventilate. So the takeaway tip here is always be looking for violations of parallel structure that you can correct. Those violations, they make your reader stumble, even if ever so slightly. And when they're stumbling, they're not absorbing. Anytime you see a list, a bulleted list, scrutinize it for getting it in a parallel structure. These are a mess when we get them, but they always just scream for being recast in parallel. To do this, things you can do are look for the nominalizations. Those are words like analysis and inventory and projections. Those are perfectly healthy verbs that have been crushed into nouns. So you need to just let them loose, convert them back to their action form. So analysis becomes analyze or analyzed. Prepared to inventory becomes inventoried. Prepared water needs projections becomes projected water needs. Okay. You also, whack superfluous content. The team prepared the inventory of, that can all go. There's little words and other phrases that you can extract. And then for some, you might have to kind of figure out what verb is better suited in that opening position. So develop, from current as-builts of to developed as-builts of, from waterboard workshops to conducted workshops with the waterboard. Those are not the strongest of verbs, and you can probably get much better, more descriptive bullet point to use if you talk to your technical counterpoints and say, all right, now what did we really do at this workshop? What was the takeaway? What was the excitement? So the other tip here is with parallel structure, it's really handy to help find those bullets. And you can really help your text readability by breaking out those long cataloged sentences into bullets. One of the nice things about working with engineers is they do tend to think of things in groups. And when they write, they jam it all together. And so when you read through their text, it's pretty easy because they've done more than half the work to just unpack it and put it into a more reader-friendly format. Again, I mentioned there's no done, there's only deadline. This can be your step one. All right, I'm reading through technical approach text from my SMEs, and I've got a red team looming, so I need to get this turned around quick. This is my first level of revision that I'd put. And then perhaps my next round after the red team review is going to be trying to shorten them up, make them more punchy. All right. Final big bucket topic is some mindset shifts or perspectives I want to encourage y'all to embrace. So each of these is hopefully a little tip on its own. First one is provide something to say no to. Anyone feeling a touch of anxiety right now?
Yes.
For many folks, especially those who are not cool enough to get their degrees in English, ain't nothing's more daunting than that flashing cursor on an empty page. Okay? Give people something to read and say, yeah, no, that's not right at all. Okay? It's that bit of primer, a starting point, a launch pad. And when you're providing text for that other person, it needn't be fully baked or fully refined. It's just to get them started, get them to say, we're missing the mark. What we really need to say is blank. I'll confess, perhaps shamefully, that I have historically tossed some pretty meager text over the fence to get my technical folks started, but I just tell them outright, this isn't great. This is just my first starting point, or this is, again, writing to the sentiment. This is kind of what I want it to sound like, and that helps give them something to respond to. Sometimes for myself, it's that bit of boilerplate, and I can't tell you, boilerplate's a bad word only if you don't look at it. So I can't, there's been countless times where I pull those paragraphs of content from my database and then proceeded to write every single word of it, just because I gave myself something to say, okay, well, this is the information that I want to present, but it's not coming out like I want it to sound. If you're giving somebody something to say no to, you got to remember that part of our job about having a thick skin. One of my mantras that I always try to tell people who come into our proposal world is you need to take pride in your work, but don't take it personally. Everybody's on the same team here. And you got to look at that feedback as not an attack on you, not an attack in the first place, but it's comes from a place of we want to make this better. because we're all in this together and we all want to win together. Okay. And criticism is a good thing. There's nothing I hate worse than going into a red team review and I say, how was it? And everybody's like, it's great. No, it's not. You didn't read it. And that's really what hurts my feelings. Don't start at the beginning. Reading is often more of a linear activity. Writing doesn't have to be. Sometimes the first thing that I write is the closing paragraph of the cover letter. It's generally a tad formulaic. It is short, and I can crank it out probably in a couple of minutes. And one of the things that should do is close out that letter with a statement of sorts that summarizes that awesome text that would come before it. First thing that does for me, of course, is prime the pump. Second is, I think, a little mental trick. I just summed up what I should have written. So now I know what it is, and I can go write it. If you watch or read the Harry Potter books, it's like when Harry saves Sirius Black from the Dementors. You know, he sees his future self cast the Patronus, and that made him know that he could do it himself. See, you just give yourself a little trick. Finally, the third thing is, again, it gets past that blinking cursor on the blank page, and sometimes just the mental comfort that provides is enough to open up the floodgates. And finally, there's the final thing to talk about. Find your gang. It's really important to find somebody who does not write like you. If you're in a small firm, it may be one of your technical counterparts. If you're in a larger firm, it could be somebody in your marketing department. In my realm, I'm a bit of a fluffy writer. I'll own that. I also tend to write in complex sentences. One of my colleagues she's my opposite, and they're very good at being direct and to the point. And I value this person's input on my text almost more than anyone else's. Yeah, it gets bloody. But again, I get a perspective on what I've written that doesn't come natural to me, especially under pressure. And again, like that ever happens on proposals. So now when I'm writing, I'm that person's a voice in my head, and I'm thinking, how are they going to respond to what I've written? So the key takeaway of this is just your writing won't improve in isolation. It's not going to happen. Writers need readers, and our readers aren't us. They aren't like us. And if that's the kind of writing you want to do, work on your diary instead. So, and that gets me to the end of my slides. Never end with that slide, but I just did it.
Hey, perfect. Thank you, Brian. One question before I hop on and do my last final slides, Brian. And Amy just provided some, but Abe had a question on recommendations for books that go into more detail on the topics you just went over.
Oh, well, just pulled up the chat. That's good. Let's see. I like, it may seem trite, but I love the Shipley proposal guide. I think that's a great resource. And if somebody doesn't have it on your desk or in your office, I'd get one, and no, I don't get a kickback on that. There's another one, Handbook of Technical Writing, I believe is the title of that one. And it's just a nice reference guide that helps you kind of clear out some topics about various topics. Sorry, see, again, writer, not talker. I think, Elements of Style. Yep, that's obviously a classic. And I have a whole shelf full of books at my office. Garner's Modern Usage. I like that one a lot. But I think those would be the ones I'd add to the list. And Amy, thank you for the unintentional save there to toss those out.
Perfect. Okay. Well, while I'm switching screens, if there's any other questions, put them in the chat. Hold on. Can you see my screen, Brian?
Yes.
Okay. Come on. Work with me. Okay. Turn off subtitles. Oh, why did it start over? This is not going to work with me today. We'll just skip it. Okay. Let me close this. All right, something special for those that have stayed on, all 45 of you now, that I'm offering for the first time. So are you frustrated because you aren't winning those proposals you expected, whether it's your writing or whatever that looks to be on your feedback? So an offer for the few of you on the call, or for those on the call, take advantage of my 7-figure firms consulting Eagle Eye for winning proposals with a unique proposal audit opportunity. The QR code does work. So if you want to scan that, otherwise we'll actually be sending out an email with the link to the recording here in a little bit. So what you'll get with this audit is a step-by-step action plan to improve your document. Obviously a face-to-face consultation with me to make sure that you are ready to win. There's the URL. And then I've used the same framework, which is a 6-step framework, to help Kiewit win over $2 billion in new work over a 2-year period. Ames win a $24 million CMGC here in Fort Collins in Colorado. And then Kramer most recently win their largest project for the firm, which was a $500 million CMGC for CDOT. So if you have that important proposal coming up that you must win, I'll include the link here in the chat once I exit out. The pricing is the $24.97. It's a promotional pricing for the first 10 people. It won't be offered at this price again, according to my marketing and business coach. And then you can cash in on the audit anytime in the next 6 months. So here's the link again. What it includes is we'll review up to 2 non-price volumes of your existing proposal from your client's perspective. So there are obviously some things you'll need to gather, and we could go over that on the call once you make the purchase. And so we'll use my firm's 6-step framework and then provide you some great feedback on how to improve your next proposals. So I'll go now to back to questions. I'll take off share screen. I'll include the link in the chat. And then let me go back to Zoom. And then now we can see Brian. And I'll add myself. Okay, what other questions do we have for Brian on writing to make it good, or whether it's the different methods of persuasion, the arguments, how to make cohesion, his tips? Any questions? Feel free to come off of mute. You can ask your question, or if you don't want to, you can also put it in the chat. And then there's the link to the proposal audit.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's me, Martha.
Okay, thank you, Martha.
I want to know, Brian, what is the best way to work with technical people who tend to put their entire tech approach in bullet points? What is your advice on sort of making that into a paragraph and making it sound nice?
Next question, please.
Oh, thanks a lot.
I know Martha. She sits on the other side of the wall for me. So I'd say, excuse me, if you obviously can't toss it back at them and say, come on, I need some flesh here. I most often kind of, look at how to understand where those bullet points are going, and perhaps not quite consciously speaking, but what I need to do to put those together into a type of paragraph. Do I need to focus on a more theme oriented few sentences where all of them need to kind of start with the same concept or idea? Or is there a shift in the bullets again later on where I kind of look at how I need to transition from one to the next? First thing, though, I'll be honest, that I'd probably do is just pull them all together into a paragraph and do the most basic rewrite that I could, which is just, and it depends obviously how each is written, but it might be just a matter of, first we will do blah, blah, blah. Next, blah, blah, blah. Third, and just take it out of the bullets into a narrative and have that as my starting point. Next thing, and again, being the all hands on deck type approach, is that I would toss it back to that writer before it's ready for one of the milestone reviews, and get with that person and say, this is how I've compiled this into a paragraph. Does this sound right? Am I changing your meaning? Is it conveying what we need to convey? And of course, have I said anything untrue? And I will say that is one of those points in our craft where I think it is helpful when we are a little more masters of the content. I think if it's someone who's first jumping into the engineering world and they're tasked with that, it's going to be a lot harder than when you've been in the field for better part of a decade, working with the same people and the same content for so many years, that you get to a level of understanding of what that text is actually supposed to be doing. So, not perhaps a fully satisfying answer, Martha, but
no, it was helpful. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
All right. Who else? We have 3 more minutes for those that are still on. What other questions for Brian or myself?
Suggestions to improve writing abilities. Yep, Amy did just nail it. You got to practice, and it's always the thing that I find hard is that, again, so much of what I do is rewriting. There are a lot of old dogs, not to be ageist, but there are a lot of old dogs at our firm, and it's really hard to help them overcome 40 years of bad writing habits. So start with the young ones, or the newer ones to your firm. Again, practice. And the last point that I made was find that counterpart that you can work with, somebody that you trust well enough that you can say, I'm struggling here. This is what I've put together. Please read it and give me honest feedback, candid feedback. You don't want somebody who just reads it and says, oh, no, that's great. Find somebody who's going to dig in and say, you wrote this here and it's not working. I don't follow what you're saying, and either be able to provide you some distinct suggestions of, you're saying X, try this, or be able to talk through it with you and try to identify, what it is that you can do to clarify. So.
All right. Do you see Amy's question, Brian?
Yeah.
So tips for dealing with the final sign-off person who is very detailed and gets bogged down on everything possible, including the space after a period.
Well, hopefully, we have those processes in place, and I think we have a good process at BHI. I'm not saying it's magically different from what anybody else really does in terms of best practices, but to hold people to that and be able to be fairly firm with your pens down deadlines. It's hard sometimes, and I'm guilty of this because I've gotten to the point where I'm pretty quick at incorporating edits, and even if it tweaks my format a bit, it doesn't bog me down. So I probably give that person a little too much time at the end and too much opportunity to get into those details. But I think it's a matter of communicating basically to them. Okay, this is due at 4 o'clock tomorrow. I need, it needs to go on FedEx tonight at 8. I need X amount of time to do production. Always give yourself plenty of cushion. And I need this much more amount of time for my necessary QC. So if you don't get it to me before first light in the morning, it's not going in. And hopefully, again, it's often easier to say. It's really easy for me to say, just be firm. But it's trying to have that as the understanding with your technical folks as you go.
Yeah, the other thing with that I've used is always frame it as, is this edit? Is this a fatal flaw? And if not, then it's, if we have time, we can get it incorporated. But if we don't, then we just don't. And we'll just have to make sure we get those edits sooner next time and get that feedback in earlier in the process. But now we're just talking, whether it's the final flip or even after gold team, we're just incorporating fatal flaws at this point, and trying to frame it from that point of view versus, yeah, here's your chance to get everything in that, that you need to.
Yeah, when you finally did that red team review.
Yeah. Catherine comment was she always sets the due date 24 hours before the due date to make sure she has everything ahead of time. Yeah, yeah, get it in early. No, there are no fake due dates because we're all working off the same document, but the sooner the better.
Yeah.
Anything else? Amy's going to incorporate more pathos into her writing. To be awesome.
Give it a go. I find it fun. I also sometimes have to say I find it fun to see what they'll let me get away with.
Yes, for sure. Any other questions for Brian or myself? Otherwise, we'll let you guys go for Friday afternoon. Yes, cool. Making something more readable and right. If the one takeaway, don't start off your cover letter with, "We are pleased to submit."
Yeah, if you do that, you already got the best tip of the day.
Right. I still have clients who fight me on that. They're like, "Well, that's how we start ours." And I'm like, no, it's not. No, like this just doesn't work anymore. So make sure we're all preaching that till the end. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Brian. If there's no other, if there's no other questions, we'll end the webinar here shortly after 1 o'clock Mountain Time. We'll get the recording out here, hopefully in a few hours, as long as YouTube and others, our YouTube cooperates with me this time. And then, yes, our next webinar will be April 7th, I believe, is our date. we're talking about executive summaries and cover letters, which will be right on par with also what Brian was talking about. So a different, it will actually be two people next time. So different people's opinion on how to structure those. So yeah, that link will be coming out here, probably not next week, but the week after. So if you want it, make sure you either subscribe to the newsletter or follow me on LinkedIn and you'll see it all there. But yes, thank you, Brian. Much appreciated. Happy Friday, everyone. And yes, we'll see you all next month. All right, bye, guys.